reminds me of, and I'll talk more about it probably later in the show, but it reminds me of a storytelling seminar that I did with some product managers. And I had done sort of the whole section on the frameworks first. And then I was using some of their recorded presentations to show who had storytelling in it and who didn't. And, um, the issue was they are very good at giving examples, but not as good as wrapping the story into that and really weaving that in. Um, and so I was able to kind of lay them out side by side and say, here's somebody who's talked about, they were talking about product design, and they were talking about the software tools for the product design. And one person had told this whole story of like the person in the factory, and they had this, this issue, and then they handed it off to the other manager, and then the manager found another issue, and they came back and they talked it through, and how was that going to impact their customers that they were helping. And they laid out this whole story, so you felt like you were in the factory with them. um, this other person basically just walked through and just gave the example and walked through sort of, this does this, you put the mouse here, this does this. And, you know, I can tell the story because I remember the factory worker where I didn't, there was no other story, and I could lay that out. And I think the more you can point out where the stories are, I think people start to make a connection. I mean, have you found that with your clients? Like, once you can point out to them, because I think that's why you wrote this book. I'm going to ask you that in a second anyway. Was that people don't always know what a story is and what a story isn't.
They absolutely don't. And it's kind of, I think of marketing as kind of an apprenticeship model where newbie marketers come in and they learn from more senior marketers exactly the types of content that are created and how they would create them. And they learn about the messaging framework and they learn how to weave that into the content. And it becomes kind of a factory model, apprenticed factory model. And an actual authentic story is so far outside that model that it's hard for them to understand what you're talking about. And so they might say, oh, it's human. So they'll put in one sentence that references a human and think, I told a story. It's actually no, that it still isn't a story. Or they'll make the language more conversational, or they'll use more visuals, but the narrative is still flat and linear and informational.